Let's talk some football. Former NFL executive, author, commentator Michael Lombardi joins the show. Thank you for the time.
It's good to be here, guys. Jason, Jeff, nice to see you.
It's
Get ready
great.
for the tournament. I put my Hickory jersey on because the best coach in the tournament is still Norman Dale. So we'll see how that works out.
So, do you take a break from the football at this time of year to watch the
I,
March Madness?
I love, I learn a lot about coaching from basketball coaches. I think they see the game more in matchups than football coaches do. I think they understand each game is different, so they play each game a different style. They don't try to force the style. How many times have you heard a basketball coach say, "If we keep this game in the 50s, we can win. If it gets in the 70s, we got no chance." You never hear football coaches talk like that, right? So I learn a lot from basketball coaches, and so I like watching them. I like I was before I came on with you. I was writing a daily coach about the this notion that we have, that kids don't want to be coached. And I was watching Danny Hurley talking to his team, and you could say, it's really similar to a lot of the old school coaches. Players want to be driven, and so I think that's what I like to watch about. Learn about how the coach's style is too.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Do you think that most players still want to be driven? You're not in the college game necessarily, but you have to analyze college players. You've had to do that for a large part of
Right.
your career. We talked to Ward Manuel a few years ago when the portal was coming into existence, and his warning to us and to the world was it's going to prevent or it's going to discourage kids from competing.
Yeah.
And have we gotten to the point now that the competition that young people are supposed to go through, they no longer want to go through?
Yeah. It's a great book coming out by Jonathan Hyatt, where he discusses this, right? And he goes through it and he calls it, I'm older than both of you, but I'm pretty sure we had a play based childhood, and those are his words. Whereas this generation has a phone based childhood. And when you have a play based childhood, you learn competition, right? And this has gotten me on this track because, the Kenny Pickett thing has really bothered me because, here he is, a first round draft pick, has a chance to be a starter, and he opts to become a backup. Like, what does that tell you? And Hyatt's book is called The Anxious Generation, and a lot of it goes back to the upbringing of this play childhood, phone childhood. When you're in a play childhood, you learn how to make mistakes, you learn how to compete, and you kind of fight through the adversity. And he has this great line in there where they talk about the fake ecosystem. There was a time in America where they were planting trees in a in a in like a perfect place with perfect conditions, and they planted the trees. And what they found was, because there was no wind in this perfect condition place, the roots didn't grow stronger. They didn't develop extra hardness on their outs on the bark. And so the whole experiment was a disaster, which is a little bit like what we're dealing with in terms of, if we don't let these kids learn how to compete, then we're going to get this. And there's still some out there, don't get me wrong. But the ones that want to transfer after they've been told no, that's not healthy. It's good for maybe their pocketbook, but it's not healthy for their overall competitiveness.
I'm kind of wondering how we got there. I mean, we had you on last time to talk about your book, Football Done Right, setting the record straight on coaches, players in the history of the NFL. We just went through the start of free agency, which was kind of chaos. I mean, you got legal tampering, and then you got the negotiating period, and then you got players moving all over the place, and trades, and teams getting out of contracts, and teams getting huge contracts. Can you talk about how we got here and what we saw these last couple of weeks before we get into some players and teams?
Except for the
Well,
Cowboys,
I,
obviously.
Except for the
well,
Cowboys,
I
who
think
don't make any moves.
I think how we got here was the popularity of the sport is incredible, and because the players share in the revenue, the cap went up. And so what looked like a lot of teams were going to probably have to be restrictive in terms of what they did, we saw teams take fairly good strategy. I think you saw the Eagles, the first thing they did is re-sign one of their own players. so that I think that's what this cap did. So what we saw were it's kind of what Al Davis used to say to me all the time. At some point, kids, you got to play in the game. And what we saw was some of these teams, how do they play in the game? What do they value at positions? What are they doing? And like the transfer portal, what looks new and exciting comes with problems too, right? And so when you take a player in free agency, you better really understand what you're getting and what you're paying for. And I think it's a lesson in team building, right? And so that's what I liked about free agency, because the fan just sees the player, right? But the contract is really important. So, for example, the Jets, as of today, have signed 3 players on 1-year contracts. Tyron Smith, he's played 30 games over the last 3 years. They've signed Mike Williams, who's played 40 games over the last 5 years. And they've signed Kinlaw from the 49ers, Javon Kinlaw, who's played 4 years and has 5 sacks. And they gave him 1-year contracts, and the 3 of those players add up to $30 million. And can they stay healthy? Can they produce? See, that's the question. On a piece of paper, you say, well, the Jets have improved. But on the field, have they? And I think that's what we never talk about.
You talked about salaries. It's also how you fit. It's not just getting the best players, but how they fit together. And you mentioned Kenny Pickett, and obviously he didn't fit in Pittsburgh. How is he going to fit here when he was so disgruntled there?
I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, I know he's an Eagle fan growing up, but I asked the question this way. If he didn't want to compete against Russell Wilson, are you going to believe he's going to compete if Hurts gets hurt? I mean, like where his level of, now you could say, well, it's a new environment and things change, but, he's a 3rd-year player with a 5th-year option sitting out there at ridiculously good money. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't want to go compete against Russell Wilson. I was saying this on my show and on the podcast. If Kenny Pickett can't beat out Russell Wilson, he's not an NFL quarterback. And if Russell Wilson can't beat out Kenny Pickett, he's not one either. Like, it was going to be, forget the rhetoric, it was going to be competition. Because that's what the Steelers wanted. The Steelers wanted competition. And I'm just disappointed. Now, maybe there's something that happened there that I don't know, and I'm being too harsh on Kenny Pickett. But I have a hard time understanding how you gave up a chance to be a starter to be a backup for a guy that's going to play all the games.
Well, you say that the Steelers want competition. Why is the first thing they did when they traded for Justin Fields to say that Russell Wilson's the starter?
Because I think they want to diffuse all that. I think they wanted to diffuse that. I think they didn't want this, because the Justin Fields momentum is incredible. Do you realize today Justin Fields has a higher MVP odds than Russell Wilson does? I can't explain the Justin Fields phenomena to both of you. I can't explain it. I don't understand it. It's a runaway train that I can't catch. And so, but I think, to me, that if you know how Mike Tomlin operates, if Pickett would have been good, he would have been able to be the starter. I think they wanted it. They drafted him. Now, maybe maybe that locker room became toxic for him. I don't know. But to me, I found that I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that.
You talk about putting the pieces together in the salaries. Outside of Kenny Pickett, what do you think about the pieces that the Eagles put together? Jeff has gone back and forth with me about whether the coaches were the problem or the players were the problem last season, or the new coaches that are coming in going to be able to work with the players. What's your thought on where this team stands going into the draft now?
Well, I think, look, they told you exactly what they thought. And, they went from 60 sacks last year out of the 70 that they got to mid-40s in their sack. Their all defensive line was disappointing. So you could just see, they wanted, Riddick's available. They moved the roster bonus to April 1st. They redid Sweat's deal. So they basically said to you in free agency, our defensive line was disappointing. And some of that was on them. I mean, both those tackles got out of shape and didn't play to the level. And so I think what Philly tried to do is improve what they always do. Philly behaves in a manner that comes from the owner, that he believes the game's won up front. And then I think what the other thing I think they got to was, look, we are committed to Hurts. And to make Hurts a better player, we have to have a legitimate running game. And for them to pay for a running back when they typically never did, to play behind a good line, I think, to me, it's a smart move. Here's what I don't understand about what goes on in the league. A slot receiver can make, Gabe Davis just made $13 million down in Jacksonville per year. He's going to catch 50 balls, 45 balls, right? Maybe he'll average 13 yards a catch. Great. Okay. Barkley's going to touch the ball 200 times, right? He's going to touch in the running game. He's going to touch it another 50 to 60 in the passing game. Like, that's not more valuable than what a slot receiver brings to the table. That's why Tyler Boyd's not getting a contract. So I think it was a smart signing, and I think people see it as, well, they paid for their, yeah, they did. But he's an elite player. He's a really good player, and he is going to make Hurts a better player. Sometimes the player forces you to remind you what you really should be doing, right? I think Miles Sanders made a big difference to their team 2 years ago, and they kind of thought that they could replace him. And I think the cold water on their face this offseason was, maybe it's harder to replace him than we thought.
Barkley made Daniel Jones a better player too. Without him, where did the Giants go?
Well, the Giants have a hard time being honest with themselves. They have violated the golden rule that I believe in tremendously, which is, if you can't evaluate your own team, how are you going to evaluate somebody else's, right? Like, I'm on record as saying the Daniel Jones contract was it was ridiculous. I'm on record as saying that. They all laughed at me. They all said I'm a Giant hater. Whenever you attack a team's players, you become a hater. I said that Justin Fields wasn't a good player. You're a Bears hater. I said Trubisky wasn't a good player. Well, you're a Bears hater. They never tell you you're right. They just say you're a hater.
So who do you like?
I like Lamar Jackson. I like a lot of guys. I didn't love Hurts when he came out.
Right.
I really didn't think he could throw with anticipation, but I feel like they've done a really good job. And Barkley helps that run game. Barkley gives them a bigger play action pass game too. So I agree with you. Where do the Giants go? Look, they're sniffing around every quarterback in the draft. What does that take? But what happened? They're a year too late. They should never have paid. Last year, I did a video about how the Giants had the disease of me, the Pat Riley theory, right? It got over 4 million views. Giant fans were ready to kill me. And I said, when they paid Daniel Jones all that money, it destroyed their team, because everybody in the locker room knew he wasn't the best player. And what happened? And then Barkley comes out and says, a lot of players come out and say, well, that was not what we wanted. So we'll see. Their talent level is not where it needs to be, in spite of what they've done this offseason.
What is Dallas doing or not doing this offseason, other than saying that the market is too inflated? Which, if my executive said that, I would lose my mind.
Well, I think Dallas has two issues. I think what Jerry said, we're going all in, was misinterpreted. Jerry said he was going all in to sign Parsons. He was going all in to sign Lamb. He didn't say he was going all in to sign Dorrance Armstrong. He didn't say he was going all in, to re-up some other players. I think, to me, that's it. I think that I've said this all year. I think the Cowboys overachieved. I don't think they underachieved. I don't think they're an elite team talent-wise. I really don't. Think about this. Tyron Smith signed for $6.5 million on a one-year contract with the Jets. He would have stayed. Now, $6.5 million. All right. It's a tax-free state in Dallas. Now, playing for the Jets, as we know, living in New Jersey, as I do, it's a pretty heavy-duty tax state. So if the Cowboys would have offered $5.5 million, it would have been a better deal for him, right?
Right.
And they didn't even offer that. He took the Jet deal. What does that tell you about him? But what does that tell you about the Cowboys? They're going to move Tyler Smith out there? I think this is a regroup year for the Cowboys. I really do. I think it's a reboot.
While they paid Dak $59 million.
Yeah, exactly. And they have no running back. Who's going to be the ball carrier? Not that I thought that Pollard was playing great last year. I didn't. I think Pollard was coming off the knee, and he didn't look like the same player.
You talk in your book about Hall of Famers who should and shouldn't be a Hall of Famer. Well, one person you haven't talked about yet, because he just retired in this city, is Jason Kelce. What's your evaluation of whether or not he should be in or shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, and will you include him in that book 10 years from now?
Well, I think you're asking me, is he a top 100 player? I
Yeah.
probably have to go through it more in detail and compare them. And I think you have to kind of the center position back in the old days when some of those guys played center, there was nobody lined up over the nose. They were always in a two technique. And so you have to kind of take a little bit of that with a grain of salt. Was he better than Mike Webster? Was he better than Dwight Stevenson? That's hard for me to really I can't see that, I can't see that. But Dwight Stevenson, who nobody remembers, I'm sure you guys do, was incredible. Damani Dawson was the best center I've seen play against. Damani Dawson was rare. So I would say, I'd have to do more. He's not like, okay, I'm just going to vote for him to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, from a popularity standpoint, he certainly is going to get in the Hall of Fame. I mean, this idea that we should waive his 5 years to get him in the Hall of Fame by some Eagle fans. I mean, are we kidding? We didn't waive it for Peyton Manning. Did you hear they want to take Rocky statue down and put Kelce up?
Oh, I have not heard that, but it does not surprise me.
We never get carried away in this city. Never.
No, it's remarkable. Look, I think he certainly qualifies for the lot of consideration. Charles Haley was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, is Haley better than Kelce? I mean, they're two different positions, but I know Haley, and he changed the game. It'll be interesting to see. But all this, though, is still we're still talking about a popularity thing, Jeff. I mean, it's a lot of the Hall of Fame, and I'm not suggesting that Kelce's going to get just solely on popularity. He's a really good player, smart player, too, which I think they're going to miss. I think they're going to miss him a lot, especially with all of the audibles they run at the line of scrimmage when they run that quarterback draw. But I just don't think it's a slam dunk because nobody goes back and looks at how good Damani Dawson was or how good, some of these other guys were. Dwight Stevenson, Jesus God.
Before we let you go, we know you'll be putting out a lot of great content in the weeks leading up to the draft. Where can people find your podcast? Can they get your book? Tell us where to find you.
Well, I mean, I'm unfortunately I'm everywhere. Find me on Twitter, M Lombardi NFL, Instagram, M Lombardi NFL. It's just social media is so bad. Every time I go on it, I'm like, why? This is ridiculous. But you can find it there. The book's still available in all bookstores, and it'll be. I had Aaron Donald in the top 50 when I wrote the book because I knew he was getting ready to retire. I wasn't sure it was going to be this short. But, the one guy I regret when I wrote the book, I didn't have Mahomes in the top 100. He had only won one Super Bowl when I was writing the book. So I kind of thought I would have time. And, already your top 100 is outdated.
I just have one more question for you.
Sure.
You seem to be a real historian or a lover of the history of the game. In talking to people from different sports, it seems that the NFL spends less time talking about its history than a lot of other sports. Why is that?
Yeah. Because of the size of the player. Because they don't think that Mike Webster could block today because the players are too big. When Mike Webster would look a lot like Jason Kelce in terms of how his body was, right? I mean, Webster, when he was drafted in the 4th round at Wisconsin, weighed 245. Eventually he got bigger. So I think a lot of it is because the perception is the athletes today are so much better than the athletes of yesterday. So let's just dismiss it, and I think that's kind of unfair to the athletes of yesterday. There's some great athletes that we didn't really get to see the true athletic. John Mackey, Ditka, those guys. I mean, the one position we do not have, as great as all these athletes are in our NFL today, we don't have tight ends. I was talking to Belichick the other day about it. Where are all the great on the line, the John Mackeys, the Mike Ditkas, the Jackie Smiths, the guys who can block a 9 technique or block a 7 technique in the run game, and then the Ron Kramer, who can't even get in the Hall of Fame, and he's one that was an all-decade player. Where are those guys in the league? You don't find them. If you can call Kelce a tight end, you can, okay? But he's a wide receiver, and he's a great one, don't get me wrong. Right. But he's a wide receiver. He blocks a support guy. He doesn't block the 9 technique or the 8 technique. So that position is a dinosaur. The big linebacker that could run, that's a dinosaur as well. Ray Nitschke, I always remember when I was preparing for the book, I spent time with Ron Wolf, and he was like, look, I'm just telling you, Ray Nitschke could fly. And nobody thinks that way. And I think there's a lot of that. We don't honor the past. I love it when we all think that the offenses that we're all running today are just the same. They're all inventive and they're all stuff that was running before.
Well, we will keep taking you, coming on and talking about the past anytime you want to tell us how we got here and what it means going forward. Michael
Well, I
Lombardi,
appreciate you guys.
we always appreciate you giving us some time. Look forward to following what you're putting out the next couple of weeks. You have a great one.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate you. Bye-bye.